Today, one of Elon Musk's verified accounts is an openly racist, white supremacist publisher. Impressive roster of advertisers for them, I must say. Then we do the math and try to figure out how 8 radical Republicans, 8, are burning down the House. And while the government jawbones social media companies, GenZ is having none of it. I'm Bob Garfield, affable sidekick to the prince of podcasting, Steve Rosenbaum. And from various points on the eastern seaboard, this is Future Forward. Hey, Steve, any truth to the rumor that you will be running for Speaker of the House?
Well, burning down the House as a phrase just gets me to play the Talking Head song over and over again. So
you cannot be blamed for that.
What's the lyric? How did I get here? Is this my beautiful wife? Is this my beautiful? So right, yeah, I can run. I can run for Speaker of the House, or Speaker of my house. Anyway,
you're not. I've been in your house. You are not the Speaker.
You could be the Speaker of your house. Yeah, that would also be unlikely. All right, so let's just start with this Twitter X thing, because so CNN has this newsletter, Reliable Sources, and they put it out. I guess it was late last week, and at first I was just like blah blah blah, and then I read it again, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, hey, there's this really racist, terrible website, and here are the advertisers whose ads are next to it: Amazon, Samsung, Denver Broncos, Cox Communications, Stars, The Wall Street Journal, Michael J. Fox Foundation, University of Missouri, New York Waterways, Axios, Puck, Ad Age, Morning Brew, and the Asian Development Bank. And somewhat predictably, all of them were contacted, and all of them said, woe's me. Oh, golly, we never wanted to put ads next to VDare. And I did, by the way, I did the thing you're never supposed to do. I actually went and looked at the site because I know it gives them traffic and blah, blah, blah. But I looked, and I will tell our listeners so they don't have to waste their time. VDare is repulsive. I mean, it's not like gray area. They have a point of view. It's just racist, misogynist, KKK, psychopathic right-wing horror show. Mm-hmm. And so I guess this is the question that I would ask you, given your many years in advertising. We know this cycle, right? Brands find themselves with their ads on objectionable things, sleeping giants, or one of those, people points at it.
Yeah, now everybody check my ads. No longer a nonprofit. And now
separate. Separate partners split up. Mm-hmm. Sleeping giants, one guy. Anyway, check my ads. Yes. So, and then the brands get all worked up about it and say they're taking their ads down. And then it's like rinse, repeat, right? This happens with regularity.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, and we have discussed this on the show a number of times before, there is this concept of brand safety, and advertisers who pay, hard cash to be on a site with the notion of burnishing their brand by getting their message out to the right target audience, do not want to be associated with objectionable advertisers, especially Nazis, white supremacists, and so on. And as recently as a few days ago, the nominal CEO of X, formerly Twitter, was bragging about the extraordinary strides that the X platform has made to keep the site safe for advertisers. Then, of course, comes this CNN story, which has quite an impressive roster of advertisers who, unbeknownst to them, had their ads adjacent to this horrendous right-wing site. So, number one, bullshit. It's not a brand-safe platform, and the tremendous strides obviously are not tremendous strides. And there is this open question as to whether their their business interest in protecting their customers, which is to say their advertisers, really trumps Elon Musk's interest in his supposed free speech absolutism and the delight he takes in being criticized for being a playground for the worst elements of American society. He gets a charge out of that. And so, but what's really sickening, as you said, is the lather, rinse, repeat cycle that's going on here. One of the advertisers who CNN informed was advertising on their site said, well, we're taking this shit down. This is gone indefinitely, which, by the way, historically has always meant temporarily. And the others are like, well, we're investigating this, or they didn't even get back to CNN.
So
this is not a death blow to Twitter. These people, they're going to write harshly worded letters to Elon Musk or Linda, and then very soon everything will be back the way it was.
I want to play a game. I'd like to interview you, and I'd like you to take the role of the brand manager of the NFL. And I'm going to ask you a couple of probing questions, and I'd like you to answer on their behalf, with the understanding, dear listeners, that Bob has never worked at the NFL, never played football, to my knowledge. But you be XYZ brand manager, and I'll be Bob Garfield.
Okay.
So I'm curious, when you find your ad is playing in places that you find objectionable, am I wrong to presume that you go to your agency and you say to your agency, spend this amount of money on this target, and your agency then goes to a bunch of ad networks and says, we want to get the cheapest eyeballs we can to reach this audience? Are there not an endless number of ways for you to spend your money?
There are. But the easiest way is the status quo. So here's what I do. I get this call, and I say, well, first of all, I'm shocked. I am shocked that this crud showed up on Twitter adjacent to my content. This is unconscionable, and I want to tell you, it's antithetical to all of the values of the NFL. Then I call my agency and I say, is this stuff performing? And they'll say, oh yeah. Is it performing efficiently? Yeah. There's no evidence that it's harming our brand. I mean, our brand reputation numbers are still solid, right? Oh yeah. Okay. I'm going to express my outrage to the press, give it 3 months, and then let's just keep going, because it's working.
So I appreciate your transparency, Mr. Fake NFL representative, but I want to drill down on that. So let's presume that you were to say to your agency, hey, we only want to be around these kinds of tweets, warm and fun. That arguably could be censorship. Wouldn't it be simpler to just say to your brand, to your agency, hey, listen, would you please spend our money on platforms that don't go out of the way to recruit hate, misinformation, anti-Semitism, misogyny? Because we know that's what they're doing. I mean, Elon has said it publicly. He's a free speech absolutist, whatever bullshit that means. So why not just cut them off at the fucking knees? Why not?
Right.
Why does it,
so you are asking a question based on the premise that I am not a rational actor, but a morally driven actor with a true north that cares about the society and the basics of right and wrong. But that's not what brand stewards are. Their job is to assess the impact, figure out the cost, look at the performance, and if necessary, to make some public expression of outrage, which vanishes very, very quickly after some period of weeks or months. I'm not running this brand. I'm just you would do it that way, and I would do it that way, because we have a sense of moral rectitude, and that their job isn't to have a sense of moral rectitude. It's to advance the brand. Now,
I'm asking the exact opposite question. I want to what maybe I'm missing the chapter where Twitter was a fantastic ad vehicle.
Oh yeah, it's probably very cheap for them.
Cheap.
I'm sure they're paying very little money. I'm sure they're getting, their data shows that it's working for them, and that's their central fact in their lives. Now, what could disrupt that is if there were any lasting shame attached to being an advertiser for VDare, which is the name of this website. If this ever lasted more than 5 seconds of outrage expressed by us on an obscure podcast, and if it didn't get immediately usurped by the next outrage and the next and the next and the next, they may have to start thinking about matters of right and wrong. But they know it goes away. They know there's no boycotts against Twitter based on the ads that they're serving to reputable organizations. They know there's basically no risk. They talk about brand safety, but they measure. And if the metrics do not support the notion that their brand is being eroded, it's really hard to keep their attention, to make them, stop the status quo and do something complicated with their budget, which, is budgeted 9 months in advance.
All right. So I was hoping that the light at the end of the tunnel was Twitter's actually a shitty ad vehicle. It's mostly text. They really don't do graphic ads. They don't do motion. It doesn't do very well anyway. It's cheap and it's disposable. Why don't we just dispose of it? Like, even if they could say to you, we're going to make sure that your ads aren't near the really objectionable shit, that would still be, if I were a lazy ass brand manager, not a promise that I would.
Well, exactly. And that's probably why we don't have those jobs. But your premise is correct. Nobody's investment in the Twitter X platform is big enough. Nobody's is big enough that it would put a major crimp on their marketing operations to just cross it off the list of media. It's a rounding error for many of these organizations, not all of them, but many. And so the idea that you don't just walk away from it because it's such a paltry percentage of your spend, to me, is astonishing. But moral courage is not what got people their jobs.
Let's move on to mainstream media's coverage of the Matt Gaetz attack on democracy. Here's the thing that puzzled me in the coverage last week. So there's this vote, and all of a sudden, the Speaker of the House is out, and I'm trying to understand the math of it all. So all the Democrats said, we're not here to help the Republicans. You guys are on your own. Got it. It's such a close majority that 8 members of the so-called conservative right could sway the vote. But here's what I don't get, and this is why I kept waiting. People kept saying, "Well, the Freedom Caucus, 8 people." I did the math. I actually had to do, which is not what I do generally. At the 8 people that control the Republican Congress amounts to 3.7% of the seated Congress people. So if I told you that there was going to be a vote in your community and 3.7% was going to swing, would effectively get their way, you'd say, wait, that doesn't make sense. So I Googled to see if anyone was reporting that number, and the answer was nobody was. Fine. And then, the drumbeat is, well, who will the candidates be for the House, for the Speaker's role? And there are now essentially 2 candidates, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, both of whom are members of this 3.7%. Mm-hmm. So explain to me, because I'm a little outraged about this, of the 200 some other Republican Congress people, not one of them wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I think that the majority might support me. What is there no other candidate, or are they just not getting media attention because they're quietly doing a backroom lobbying effort? Will there be some moderate candidate?
Well, okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Let's start with, it's easy to understand how this 3.7% or whatever it is has the power to shut down one of the three branches of government, the Congress. It's because it's the Democrats and Republicans are nearly represented the same in Congress, and the Republicans have a couple extra votes. That means, presuming Democrats vote across party lines, it only takes a couple of votes within the Republican Congress to stymie any piece of legislation. And further, in order to give Kevin McCarthy his job way back, whatever it was, 9 months ago,
17 votes, yeah.
Speaker of the House, they said, yeah, we'll vote for you. But here's our agenda, which is, of course, this reactionary Christian Taliban, bigoted, racist agenda. We'll let you be speaker, but here's what we want. And if you piss us off, we can bring a vote up to the House. One congressman can stand up and demand an up or down vote on keeping you as the speaker. So this was inevitable. This was decided when Kevin McCarthy swallowed his pride and said, "I want to be speaker. I will do this deal." So it wasn't a question of if; it was a question of when. And because the numbers are so tight, 3.7%. It turns out to be a very big percentage because they can hold the House of Representatives hostage. It's the same reason, really, that Manchin, Senator, what's his name? Is it James Manchin? The nominally Democrat from West Virginia holds so much power in the Senate because he is a pretty hard conservative, but he's a Democrat, and he can be a deciding vote in the Senate. So if he votes on the conservative side, the Democrats are screwed. So he has an enormous amount of power by virtue of the composition of Congress. It's bad, and it's just an expression in microcosm of what's even worse, which is the power of the minority party. Due to gerrymandering and so forth, Republicans have power wholly out of proportion to their actual popularity in the country.
Okay, so presuming the Democrats don't want Jim Jordan or Steve Scalise to be the speaker, why wouldn't it be as simple as all the other moderate, rational Republicans who are not in the hard right 8 all vote for someone moderate, someone who can actually speak in full sentences, and 8 Democrats agree collectively that they're going to call in sick that day?
Well, that can happen. But first of all, as to the premise of the question, the moderate Republicans, there are no moderate Republicans to speak of in the House. They are all very hard right, completely captive to Trump, because if they do anything to displease him, he primaries them, and they lose in their home state primaries to some, complete wacko right-wing wing nut. And so, they all live in fear of Trump. So the idea that there are 8 people or even 3 who are going to put up a fuss, I mean, that's pretty far-fetched. It's possible, and it may happen.
So you think Jim Jordan being Trump's choice, that he is now the shoo-in for the role?
I don't know. I mean, you've got to think that there are 3 Republicans who don't want that piece of shit as the Speaker of the House, which would have horrendous ramifications for policy. Horrendous. And you'd have to think that somewhere in that caucus, there are 3 people who do not want the democracy to go up in smoke. We know of 2, but I don't know of 3.
There will come a time in our lifetime, and maybe in this calendar year or next, when they will lower a bunch of construction workers down on ropes and scaffolding off the side of Trump Tower and with a crowbar take those letters off the building.
Yeah.
It's happened in a bunch of other buildings in New York already. All those Riverside Drive buildings used to be Trump buildings, and the names all came off. When you say Trump's going to primary everyone, he has to actually have some money to do that, theoretically. Anyway,
if he says jump, the Republican National Committee, and therefore the Republican National Campaign Committee, Congressional Campaign Committee, says how high. So they are also at his beck and call. This still is a party, despite the fact that he is a criminal sociopath, racist piece of shit, narcissistic, rapist, fraud, liar. He still holds on to the levers of power.
You missed one. The only person in history to ever run casinos into bankruptcy.
Yeah, he's a genius. The art of the deal.
All right, let's move on to chapter 3, which is fun. So chapter 3 is an article that we pulled from the nightcolumbia.org, and the title is Jawboned. This is on October 4th, 2023, and I'll just read you the first paragraph. On October 20th, 2023, the Knight Institute will host a closed convening to explore the question of jawboning, informal government efforts to persuade, cajole, or strong-arm private platforms to change their content moderation policies. Participants in the workshop have written short notes to outline their thinking on this complex topic, which the Knight Institute is publishing in the week leading up to the convening. So there's another piece to the jawboning story we're going to get to in just a second, but I want to start with are you a proponent of jawboning?
In the current environment, yes, I am. And jawboning means you put the arm on, intimidate, squeeze, cajole, beg, whatever it is. You work for a government agency, and you try to persuade Facebook or whatever to, do the following in their content moderation practices, which they're not doing now. I read these articles from people who work in content moderation at Facebook, whose feelings are so hurt that the implication is that they're not doing their job and they don't care about the public, and their dedicated team works tirelessly. I have no sympathy for that, because the companies they work for are amoral except for when they're immoral. And they have done tremendous harm, including the cost of human life, all over the world, but certainly in our democracy. And I don't give a flying fuck if the teams assigned to solving this problem get their feelings hurt because the government has to squeeze them to protect the public. However, you also have to reserve some disgust for the Congress, which could act. The Congress could always act, but they use these platforms for their campaigns, and they need the status quo politically, no matter how important real content moderation is for the society and for the human race. And as usual, they're craven and self-interested. And as we learned from guns for decades and decades and decades, vote their own political interests over what's good for the society. So, if the government has nothing left in their quiver but to shoot the jawboning arrow, go crazy.
So I want to end on a positive note, which I know will seem like a little bit of a hard fork for this podcast, this particular episode. So this is an article from the Up and Up, and I'll just read you the first paragraph. This is an attempt to protect the next generation, a youth-led push to make the internet safer for young people. The coalition is led by students like Emma Lemke, the founder of Log Off Movement, who testified in front of the Senate, as well as Zaman Qureshi, who's a policy advisor and heads up digital strategy for the Real Facebook Oversight Board. So both of them I know reasonably well. Both of them are on the Sustainable Media Center Advisory Board. And
the Sustainable Media Center existing for the very purpose of empowering young people to protect themselves, their generation, and everybody else from the depredations of social media and the toxic influence on the society.
And the reason why I like these two stories back to back is they are the opposite of jawboning. I mean, these two young people and a lot of their colleagues and friends are just ferocious and focused. And the organization is called Build It For Us. And what I like a lot about what they're doing, but I just, for the purposes of this podcast, what they're saying in Build It For Us is, don't build it to mistreat us. Don't build it to turn us into the product. Don't build it to, rape and pillage our economic value for your customers, but instead build it so that this community can use it as tools rather than torture. And I admire them both so much.
Make it not just a utility that happens to benefit you with obscene profits, but make it a public good.
Exactly correct. And they have in their plan. We'll put the link in the show notes. They have a list of 5 very specific asks, which I think are incisive and actionable. It does seem to me a lot like that moment in history when everyone, figured out that cigarette companies were manufacturing cancer-causing, death sticks, and the tobacco company said, "Well, we're going to have to research this. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to we're going to take this very seriously, and we're going to do a multi-year study to see, whether or not, filtered versus unfiltered cigarettes are more deadly, or whatever they ended up doing, which is, essentially just what you do when you have power, which is you run the clock." And
they ran the clock. They obfuscated. They lied. They ignored the data about the millions and millions and millions. There's a Holocaust every year. To this day, this is 2023. There are 8 million people who die of cigarette-caused disease around the world every single year, a Holocaust per year. And this is after we supposedly woke up to the threat. So you're right. They're behaving like the tobacco companies and big energy. They are doing whatever is necessary to fake care for the commonweal in order to advance their own interests and their own obscene profits. Fuck that.
What was the name of the woman that was foolish enough to allow you to interview her? Was it Atria?
She's the chief science officer, senior vice president for Philip Morris International. Yeah. And her, she of course acknowledged what I just said. She copped to it. And I said, "So tell me again why you continue to sell cigarettes while you're waiting for this smokeless tobacco thing to take off. 8 million people dying a year worldwide." And she said, "Well, if we didn't do it, somebody else would." Oh,
wonder if she still has her job.
I'm
going to say no. All right. We are out of time. Note to people in the tobacco industry, if Bob says he wants to do an interview with you, the correct answer is no, I'm sorry. Can we schedule it for maybe sometime after the year after next? Yeah. I can squeeze you in for week of Thanksgiving 2026. Have an excellent week.
You too, Steve. Bye.
All right, talk to you.